It is 4 minutes past 12. You're listening to the Mid Morning Talk on Salam Media with your host, Maria Mukwanda. On today's discussion with Islamic Careline, we are talking perfectionism. Perfectionism is a trait that makes life an endless report card on accomplishments or looks. When healthy, it can be self motivating and drive you to overcome adversity and achieve success. When unhealthy, it can be a fast and enduring track to unhappiness. What makes extreme perfectionism so toxic is that while those in its group desire success, they are most focused on avoiding failure, resulting in a negative orientation. To tell us more is social worker Shuhaida Adam. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shuhaida, shukran for joining me.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wonderful to be with you people again.
Alhamdulillah, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. We hear about perfectionism and perfectionists all the time here and there. In fact, I consider myself a perfectionist as well. But I don't know if it can be a disorder or if it is a disorder. Please tell us more. Is perfectionism a mental disorder? What is perfectionism?
Okay, let's unpack it. There's so much to this personality trait. So it is a personality trait. It is
Hmm.
not a mental health disorder, a mental illness on its own. However, the presence of perfectionism can come alongside other mental health disorders like your anxieties, your OCD. So, obsessive compulsive disorder, oftentimes we use it interchangeably with perfectionism. People think that people with OCD are striving for perfectionism, or people who have perfectionist traits have OCD, but it's actually different, two different. But perfectionism is a trait. OCD is a mental health disorder. OCD is not controllable. The person with OCD has intrusive thoughts, repetitive thoughts that they cannot control, and impulses that they simply cannot control. When we unpack a little bit now around perfectionism, I'll just speak a little bit about where it comes from. You'll see that most of the times and most of the researchers believe that it is learned behavior. There may be
Hmm.
certain a little bit of geneticism around it, where you may inherit certain traits towards drive, towards ambition, etc. But by and large, most researchers believe that it is learned. It is learned either through observation of the world around us, and especially significant people. So childhood is very significant for people who have perfectionism, and significant relationships are very, very influential around perfectionism. And also, it can be learned as a response to certain difficult or certain harmful adverse conditions, certain harmful and adverse experiences also. So by and large, it comes about through our life experiences, through the world around us. And other mental health disorders, oftentimes it's uncontrollable. It develops as a result of maybe genetic factors. It develops through no real influence, or through no real impact of the world around us. So it's not really controllable. And when we look at treatments also, you'll see also a lot of it, your mental health disorders, a lot of the treatments are very specific and more clinical. And perfectionism, we won't say there's a treatment for it, but people can go for help in learning to cope with it and how to lessen it.
Hmm. All right. Now, is there a cause, a known cause for perfectionism? Is this something, since you said that it's learned behavior, which forms part of a person's personality, is there a known cause for it?
Um, One of the most common causes or contributing factors is through childhood, very high standards set by caregivers and parents,
Mm.
society, the standards that are imposed on an individual or on a group of people. Let's look a little bit. I just want to unpack exactly what are we talking. You introduced it very, very well. And I just want to drive a little bit about how perfectionism is intense pressure, right?
Mm.
Intense pressure towards a a certain standard. Now we can either set that standard for ourselves. So some people, if perfectionism develops as maybe a way of coping with adverse experiences, we can set that standards on ourselves. And other people, they may then experience it from others, especially parents and caregivers, and perhaps in the school environment where there's a lot of focus on appearance and focus on achievement. So a lot of that can be internalized by a child, and it can carry over into their adulthood, right? So usually when we think of perfectionism with children, we just think of academic achievement and maybe sporting achievement. But oftentimes it can even take just in terms of appearances, in terms of um, play, in terms of their social interactions. They can face a lot of pressure to have for these areas of their life to be absolutely perfect. And what are then some of the outcomes of this, especially for children? They tend to have low self-esteem. They tend to have a strong fear of failure. They tend to be quite rigid in their thinking. So the approach to most things are black and white. It's either or. There's no in between. So they have to get it perfectly right. It has to be maybe a perfect match, or have to get straight A's, or else they find that they may not even be able to do it. Or if they do experience failure, it has a very, very, very strong impact on them, on their well-being. You find that people who have extreme perfectionism, they have anxiety, they report to have feelings of low self-worth, a lot of feelings of guilt. They may even become on the extreme end. They may be suicidal, or they may completely withdraw from functioning in life. So people who have a strong fear of failure, they may not attempt at all. And oftentimes, what we find with young people also is that drive to succeed, and they burn out. And they also tend to become people pleasers. So they will do what other people want them to do. Okay. So, especially for young people, they may go and choose a career that their parents want them to do. Or that's perhaps at school they're facing pressure, or it's the in thing, it's a very popular career at that point, and they're choosing it to live up to a certain standard set by either the caregiver or society, but it's not what they truly want to do. So when they're in it, they may then have burnout, they may become disillusioned, they may completely withdraw, and because they haven't really dealt with failure, coped with failure, when they hit their first major stumbling block in life, they don't have the skills to overcome it. They do not have the inner tenacity to pick themselves up and then perhaps look at alternatives, or to even do something that is not really seen as perhaps successful in either by themselves or by the significant people around them. In terms of relationships also, it can have a strong impact on how you interact with your partner. Or if you are in a relationship with a perfectionist, if you are married to a perfectionist, it can also leave you as the person who does not have this. So if your partner has these traits, it can leave you also with feelings of low self-worth, or feeling not good enough, or there can be a very strong disconnect with your partner, because your partner has these high standards that they expect you to live by, and for you to meet their needs. And if you cannot do that, then you are regarded as lesser, or you are regarded as perhaps unworthy. That's one thing that children also tend to pick up if they are growing up in a home where there is a lot of pressure on achievement, and where there's a lot of pressure on being right, getting things perfect, being getting straight A's, not making mistakes, is that they then learn that love and acceptance is conditional. So they often feel that if they are not living up to a certain standard, if they don't do things a certain way, if they don't look a certain way, then significant people will not love them. People of their friends will not accept them. So there's a very strong pressure that they place on themselves to fit in to the mold of what other people expect of them. Um, so, which is essentially that's unrealistic. We cannot please all the people all the time, kind of a thing. And you will have an off day. That's just human nature to not necessarily be always in the front line. So when you are not able to maybe meet that certain standard, you then start feeling unloved. And the reality of our environment and a lot of our parenting today is that parents also they impose high standards on their children. And when their children make mistakes or when there's failure, the parents withdraw the connection with their child. So they may berate the child, they may insult their child, they may make them feel as if they are not worthy, they are not good enough, they did not do their best. So then we have children who grow up into adults who will view success as their way of connecting with people, who will view material items as their way of connecting with people, who will view status as their way of gaining acceptance, which can place a lot of social pressure on you. And when things don't go your way, you are then not sure how to deal with it. And like I said earlier, you can then develop some harmful coping mechanisms, or you may develop other mental health disorders because of the strong pressure you place on yourself. One thing that I've also read about how parents are developing perfectionism in children is when you constantly praise their achievements. So you constantly praise the end outcome and you don't
Mm,
notice the effort. You don't acknowledge the effort that the child has made. Or if you constantly you're praising them over others, telling them that they did better than someone else. Well done, you were the best player. The other players were not on your league, that kind of a thing.
mm,
Not acknowledging effort. And when your child makes a mistake, then you look at the end result again. You look at the failure, but you don't look at the amount of time they put in. You don't look at the work they put in. Where there's no real positivity around anything relating to anything less than perfect. So
mhm,
it can develop over time through mental interaction and, like I said, social interactions. And also sometimes when there are certain cases of abuse or harmful home environments, um, children may take that onto themselves and may hold that the harmful actions are their own fault. So they then want to change that by becoming the perfect child, by pleasing
mm,
the person who's committing harmful actions to them. You find that children of abuse, where their parents are physically abusing them, emotionally abusing them, they have a strong desire to please the parent, to be the perfect child, because it's basically a survival mechanism for them. If the parent cannot find any problem with this child, then they will not. The child believes in that they will not experience any abuse. However, I think we have unpacked child abuse before, and we can do a few shows just to refresh on it. You'll find that the perfect child is still in the firing line of harmful behavior by an abusive parent. So that pressure that they place on themselves, it becomes stronger and stronger because they're trying to be a good child and it doesn't seem to work. So then they place
mm,
a stronger pressure on themselves, and it then again becomes the extreme end of the
mhm.
perfectionist.
All right, Shuhaida, great points that you have just raised there. And let us take a quick break and we will continue thereafter.
Our next guest. So I wanted to show you something. This is clip. What's up here? Guest
Don't
clip.
worry about it. Here's a name and here's a number. Don't worry about that.
Okay, take
Salam.
it away.
Right, so you are listening to the Mid Morning Talk on Salam Media, and we are talking perfectionism today with Shuhaida Adam on from Islamic Careline. Shuhaida, shukran for staying with us. Now, um, from the points that you were raising, something that I noted was, can parents be failed perfectionists living through their kids and trying to get their kids to be perfect because they are no longer that perfect person, or they cannot do what they wanted to do back in their youth.
Very, very possible. Very, very possible. Um, Oftentimes, we find that when parents view children as an extension of themselves rather than as their own person, then you find with that parents try to live vicariously through their child. So, for example, the parent who didn't get the opportunity to study a certain qualification, they then want to impose that that future on their child. For example, a parent who went through perhaps difficult social acceptance, perhaps for the way they looked, their weight, or their style, or whatever it was, they may then put a lot of pressure on their child to physically appear according to the social standards of the community, so that the child can have acceptance, and in their eyes, their child is then acceptable. So it
Hmm.
definitely can. We can be living, so to say, our living out our childhood demons, so to say, through our children. Um, it can be very detrimental to children. We find that children, there's, I would say it's a bit of a common trend at this point. Adult children are cutting off from their parents. They are going
Mm.
no contact because of certain harmful behaviors, like parents having extreme being harshly critical towards the child, having high standards of perfectionism towards their child. And when the child experiences burnout, especially as an adult, they could look back and point a finger at the parents and then want to just have nothing to do with the parent. So,
Mm.
with that, we want to caution parents also to recognize that ultimately, yes, of course, we want the best for our children. However, to recognize that what was best for you when you were growing up is not necessarily what's going to be best for your child moving forward. Um, your child is their own person with their own personality, their own interests, their own set of capabilities, also their own set of talents. So we have to look at that when we are raising our children and when we are trying to guide them on the way forward. So yes, that is one type of perfectionism, the social perfectionism, where other people's standards are internalized. So especially with parents, their standards are internalized, and then the child develops a sense of perfectionism around growing up under that environment. You'll find also that that type of parent tends to be more critical, tends to be harsh, tends to be more punitive. So they punish failure. If the child doesn't do well, there may be consequences. And that also then allows the child to learn that failure is not acceptable. Or even in terms of appearance, they will do what they can to try and fit the mold of what is expected of them. So you'll find people with your your eating disorders. Sometimes it can be because of unrealistic standards, beauty standards that they are exposed to, either in the home or through their social environment, so through their friends or social media or the media that they are exposed to, etc. So it can come from a variety of sources, but it can have a harmful effect on a person's future.
Mhm. All right, now how do we deal with perfectionism? How do you, well, it's not something that you can treat with over-the-counter medication or prescription, but how do you get, or rather lessen the perfectionist traits?
Okay, so the difficult part around people coming to seek help with this is the perfectionist doesn't necessarily want to acknowledge something is wrong. They
Mm.
don't really, your perfectionists tend not to really want to come for counseling, not to really want to seek help. And that can be a very big problem because they tend to minimize or hide their problems because of keeping up appearances or telling themselves that I've got control of this issue. One of the
Mm.
driving forces behind perfectionism also is a need to control, a need to control certain behaviors or control what you can because you are very afraid of other people's reactions, which is what you can't control. You are afraid of the unknown. You're afraid of responses. So you want to control what you can, and acknowledging that there's certain the limitations around that. It can be quite difficult for that person to acknowledge. However, we do use certain types of counseling with people who want to lessen that. A lot of talk therapy to recognize what exactly is going on, what's the thoughts behind the need to succeed, the need to get things to be a certain way, the need for sticking to routine very rigidly. One other symptom of perfectionism also actually is procrastination, which
Mm.
sounds completely opposite to what we said earlier, that the person is usually driven and they usually succeed. Some people with traits of perfectionism, because they're so afraid of it not coming out, they actually procrastinate to even start
Mm.
doing what it is they need to do, whether it's a project or making an item or going and going through an experience or something. So we will try and understand what's going on. And our clients, we will always want them to understand, also help them make sense of their thoughts and help them make sense of their inner world. Then we look at some things like just guiding them. So certain things like helping them, the ones who are constantly checking and rechecking and don't trust their work is right. So they constantly get people involved. We're trying to guide them around that. How can they lessen those behaviors? And very important is the message and the self-talk that's going on, the narrative in our minds. So how can we change that? Trying to become more self-compassionate, um, being kinder to yourself, being more in tune with your feelings and dealing with those feelings. So if you are going to experience a sense of failure, actually really dealing with it, going through it, etc. So helping clients focus on their feelings, and building their compassion and recognizing their moods, recognizing exactly what it is that they are afraid of. So, talk therapy around that, then encouraging flexibility. So, slowly bringing about certain change, helping clients adapt to change through the therapeutic process. So we'll stay with them right through, but helping them stay flexible. For example, when plans change, so how can they deal with that? We can come up with different methods and routines and helping them cope with last minute changes. Then exposure to things that they would typically avoid. For example, some people who have high standards of physical beauty, focusing on themselves, looking at maybe natural imperfections that are part of your body, etc., helping them with exposure to mistakes through things that they would not really want to, would have avoided before. And then helping them accept the reality of change, the reality of the world around us that is very much the world is made up of a lot of imperfections that just somehow come together in a very, very well manner. So helping people through with that. So it involves a lot of support, a lot of self-compassion, a lot of self-development, building up their self-esteem, lessening that critical voice that perhaps is constantly guiding the person in their perfectionism and in the traits that they have. So we do quite a bit of talk therapy and some CBT, helping them change their thoughts, reframing negative thoughts. It's a process because it takes a while to develop. So it is a process also to change. But if they stick and if they're committed to the counseling process, inshallah, they will definitely see a change. And it makes such a difference also within the family environment. You'll see it with parents who have changed their perfectionist traits. They see the difference in their children also very soon. They see the difference with their partners also. So it's change that you can tangibly see, and that also can be a driving motivator to continue with the counseling process.
Mhm. All right. Well, for those who thought that being a perfectionist was not a problem. If it goes overboard or if it becomes unhealthy, then it can become a problem. Like if it's not driving you to succeed in the right direction to do the right thing, then it's a problem, and that's when you need to seek help. Shuhaida, please share Islamic Careline's contact details with us.
Okay, so they can contact us 011 373 8080 or 078 727 1334. Contact us, speak to a counselor, and we can plan a way forward with our clients, inshallah.
Inshallah, Shuhaida, always a pleasure to chatting to you, and we look forward to the next time. Inshallah, have a wonderful day.
Likewise, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shuhaida Adam, social worker at Islamic Careline, taking us through perfectionism, understanding what perfectionism is and what it's all about, and how you can get help for your perfectionist traits. You can contact Islamic Careline on 011 373 8080 or 078 727 1334. You are listening to the Mid Morning Talk on Salam Media. Now, there is Nuclear Juma Masjid and Educational Institute offering free health screening to 150 elders of the community, and they require volunteers. Um, the volunteers should be qualified and students, medical students, preferably welcome. Basic medical screening will be done, glucose and blood pressure testing. All you have to do is spare a few hours on Saturday, the 23rd of July 2022, which is this Saturday at Corey Hall. Coronation screening from 10 to 12 p.m. And the poster says, "Let's make our elders feel extra special and show we care." To confirm your participation, contact Kashifa Martin on 084 3208. That's on WhatsApp. Um, you can also email imasa.gauteng@gmail.com and submit your full name, your cell number, your email address, your qualification, and times of availability. Once again, that number is 084 701 3208. You are listening to the Mid Morning Talk on Slam Media. We will be right back.